He said, "Need a hand?" with a grin that didn't belong to small talk, and before I could answer, he stepped into the spray of the pool house shower with me, warm water sliding over our shoulders, while his palm settled at my hip in a way that felt more like a promise than a question, the sun bleaching a bright strip across the wet tile as my breath hitched hard enough to echo. I had planned to rinse off the chlorine alone, had planned to pretend that the last few weeks of glances meant nothing, yet the way his thumb traced a slow circle where my towel had just been dared me to admit that I had been waiting for this exact moment since the first time he leaned over the blue water and told me the pump sounded fine. We stood so close that the steam blurred the line between our bodies, the spray hissing against tile while a caught leaf spun lazy circles in the skimmer outside, and I realized the word hand had always been the smallest part of what he was offering, because every nerve in me recognized the intention sitting just under the simple question he liked to throw when the yard was quiet. "Tell me if you want me to stop," he murmured against the curve of my neck, his voice gentle in a way that made the heat rise even higher, and I answered by sliding my palm up his back to hold him right where he was, because there are days for polite answers, and there are days for yes, that sounds like breathing. It didn't begin in the shower, even though that's where the story chooses to show its face. It began on a bright Tuesday when Cody came to clean the pool after a storm, and I tried not to stare while he skimmed sunlit oak leaves that looked like copper coins drifting through a blue sky turned upside down. I'm Jake, 32 and good at pretending I'm too busy to notice what makes my pulse shift, yet bad at hiding the way I linger on the patio when service runs long. And he's 29 with a laugh that lands low, a careful way of moving that keeps decks safe, and a habit of calling me boss when he knows the word, makes me roll my eyes and offer cold lemonade. It started with nothing that anyone else would have clocked his arm brushing mine when he reached past for the net, the way he asked about my week, like the answer mattered, the way he stayed an extra minute by the gate to pet the neighbor's dog while glancing back to see if I'd join him. I told myself he was friendly, because friendly is easier to file. Yet the first time his hand closed over my wrist to steady the hose, and our knuckles slid together under the rush, something in me clicked like a light that had always been wired but never switched. Weeks layered like sunscreen, thin and constant. A touch here, a look there, a small joke about the filter that needed a gentler hand, which he delivered with a wink I tried to ignore. Meanwhile, the July heat made the world feel slow and heavy, the kind of weather where time droops on the line and every choice asks for a yes. He had a way of working that felt like music measured, and easy coil the hose, check the baskets, test the strip, report with a nod, and I had a way of watching that, tried to look like casual interest, while my stomach did small somersaults. Every time he asked if I wanted to try the skimmer because it's more fun than it looks, boss. We found a rhythm of small things, only the two of us noticed. I brought the tall glass with too much ice and a wedge of lime. He left the invoice folded under the terracotta frog like a secret note. I asked about his little brother's community game. He asked about my presentation like he'd been awake in the room. On the afternoon that turned into this evening, the sky went white with heat, and the cicadas sang loud enough to make silence sound impossible. He finished early, said he could flush the pump if I wanted, which didn't need doing. And I said sure, because every no would have felt like a lie. The pool house is small and honest, a square of tile and a single shower with a stubborn handle, a shelf that smells faintly of eucalyptus, and a window that frames palm fronds like green hands clapping at the sun. I stepped under the water because the chlorine stung my eyes and I wanted to stop thinking, and I left the door not quite latched because that's how it has always been, even on days when nothing happened at all. His shadow crossed the threshold before his voice did, soft and testing, the way you might step onto a dock and listen for the first creak, and when I turned he was already inside the frame of steam, with one palm braced against warm tile and the other hovering at my hip like a question the world had taken too long to ask. "You're shaking," he said gently, not teasing, his forehead almost touching mine as the spray rained down on both of us, and I laughed a little because he was right, and because I could feel him tremble too. The honesty of it flattening months of careful distance into something simple and kind. The first kiss didn't land yet, because a story needs to pull you in before it gives you what you came for. But the way our mouths hovered a breath apart told the truth anyway, and when his fingers slid up my side with a touch that was more reverent than rushed, I understood that we had already crossed the border and were now choosing how to stand on new ground. Outside, the pool threw light on the ceiling, like waves dancing on the underside of a pier. A watercolor it paints on hot days when the wind rests, and somewhere a neighbor's radio murmured a summer song I couldn't place, the soft echo making the small room feel like a secret we were finally willing to keep together. He pressed closer until water ran in a single warm line from his shoulder to my chest, and the surety in his touch made every refusal I had rehearsed feel like a script from a play we were done performing, because nothing about this felt like a mistake, and everything about it felt like a beginning we had earned by waiting. "Tell me if this is wrong," he said, though the way his thumb traced my jaw admitted he already knew the answer, and I said his name in the tone that belongs to yes, the kind that is older than words and steadier than fear, the kind that makes a man step forward instead of back. When our mouths finally met, the kiss tasted faintly of mint and heat and the newness of something inevitable, and the water kept falling as if to bless us, while my hand slid to the small of his back to keep him exactly where he had promised to be, right here with me, and nowhere else. The kiss wasn't clumsy, not like the ones you stumble into on a dare or at the end of a night you'll later try to forget. It was steady, deliberate, the kind that pulls you in with one careful press, and then deepens so quickly you forget where air is supposed to come from. Cody's hand slid higher up my side, wet skin against wet skin, and the heat of it made me shiver even under the steady rush of warm water. He pulled back just enough to study my face, his forehead pressed against mine, his breath mixing with the steam, and in that pause I could see the questions in his eyes. Was this a mistake? Was this too much? Would I push him away? I didn't. Instead, I reached up, threading my fingers through his damp hair, tugging him back into another kiss that landed harder, hungrier, filled with everything I hadn't allowed myself to admit. The way he groaned into my mouth, low and rough, made my chest tighten, because it wasn't just desire, it was relief. Like a man finally exhaling after holding his breath far too long. Outside, a breeze shifted, rippling across the pool, so the reflected light flickered faster against the ceiling, a dancing reminder that the world hadn't stopped, even though it felt like it had. Cody leaned in closer, his chest pressed to mine, the water rolling in waves between us, and whispered against my lips, "I've wanted this since the first time you smiled at me from that chair." I laughed softly, my voice breaking. "You think I didn't notice the way you looked back at me when you thought I wasn't paying attention?" That confession cracked something open between us. The tension that had been building for weeks didn't just simmer, it boiled, spilling over into the way his hands roamed more boldly now, down my back, across my waist, pulling me tighter against him. I gasped when his mouth left mine to trail hot, lingering kisses along my jaw, down my throat, each one careful yet claiming, as if he was memorizing me with every touch. My back met the slick tile, his palms braced on either side of me, caging me in but never trapping me, always leaving space, always giving me the chance to stop this if I wanted. But stopping was the last thing on my mind. I pulled him closer by the waist, my lips brushing his ear as I whispered, "Don't hold back." That was all he needed. The next kiss was fierce, almost desperate, the kind that made me forget how long we'd been standing there, the kind that drowned out everything except the pounding of my heart against his. The water fell around us in endless applause. The pool light flickered through the glass, and for the first time in years, I wasn't pretending I was alive, wanted, and not alone. The second I whispered, "Don't hold back," everything inside him shifted like the careful dam he had been guarding finally cracked wide open. Cody's mouth crashed back onto mine. No hesitation now, just pure need. And the sound he made, a low growl muffled against my lips, sent a jolt down my spine that left my knees weak against the slick tile. His hands roamed lower, gripping me with a certainty that said he had thought about this more times than he would ever admit. And the truth in that grip made me melt into him without a shred of doubt. The water streamed over both of us, washing across our shoulders, our chests pressed flush together, every inch of heat magnified by the steady, cool drip of steam trailing down. He pinned me gently against the tile, his arms on either side of me, but his eyes stayed locked on mine, searching, daring, as if waiting for even the smallest flinch. There wasn't one. Instead, I reached for him, my fingers sliding down his back until he shuddered hard enough to make him drop his forehead against my shoulder, groaning my name like it was the only word left in his mouth. Outside, the cicadas sang louder, their chorus filling the night. But inside the pool house, the only sounds were the hiss of water and the rhythm of our breathing, fast and ragged, tangled in gasps and laughter that slipped between kisses. It wasn't clumsy, though we moved like two people who had been rehearsing in silence for months, waiting for the cue to finally let the act begin. And now that it had, there was no stopping the momentum. He lifted me slightly, bracing me against the wall, his strength surprising, his grin wicked even as his lips trailed fire along my throat. "God, Jake," he muttered, his voice rough and breathless. "I've been dying to do this every time you leaned back in that chair and teased me with that smile." I laughed, pulling his face back up to mine, kissing him hard enough to cut off the rest of his confession, then stop talking and finally do it. That made him laugh too low, wild, and then the laughter broke into another kiss, fiercer than the last. Teeth grazing lips, hands gripping tighter until it was impossible to tell where the steam ended and our heat began. Every touch was sharper, every movement bolder, as though we were making up for every stolen glance, every brushed hand, every unspoken word that had piled up over weeks. The tension that had lived between us wasn't just gone, it had exploded into something unstoppable. I held on to him, clinging as if I'd been waiting for this exact storm all my life. And when he whispered my name again, shaking against me, I knew there was no way back. This wasn't a mistake, wasn't a fling, wasn't something to be buried under chlorine and excuses. It was the truth, raw and burning, and we had finally set it free. When the kiss finally slowed, both of us panting, foreheads pressed together, he whispered hoarsely, "This changes everything," and I smiled, still gasping, brushing his cheek with my thumb. "Good. I don't want it to stay the same." The water had gone lukewarm by the time we finally slowed, both of us panting, our lips red, our foreheads pressed together. Cody kept one hand firm at my waist, the other cupping my jaw as if he was afraid I might slip away if he let go, and the look in his eyes wasn't lust anymore. It was something deeper, steadier, like he was memorizing me. We stood there with the spray hitting our shoulders, steam curling between us, and I realized the hunger had cracked open something more fragile than desire. He kissed me again, slower now, deliberate, tasting not of urgency but of relief, as if the part of him that had been holding back for weeks finally understood it didn't have to anymore. When his lips left mine, he rested his head against my shoulder, the water running over both of us, and whispered, "I thought I was crazy thinking you wanted me back." I laughed softly, brushing my fingers through his wet hair. "Crazy? You really thought I bring you lemonade every week just because I'm a nice guy?" That made him laugh too, the kind of laugh that shook through his chest against mine, warm and real. And for a second we just stood there laughing like idiots in the shower, the tension dissolving into something lighter. But then he tilted my chin up with two fingers, his eyes burning into mine again. "This isn't just a fling, Jake. I need you to know that. And that's water." The sincerity in his voice cut through me. I pressed my palm to his chest, feeling the steady thump beneath. I know, I said simply, and I don't want it to be. Outside, the pool lights shimmered across the fogged glass, waves of blue and silver sliding across the walls like a secret dance, and the cabin-like quiet of the pool house made it feel like the world was holding its breath for us. We stayed there until the water ran cool, until our laughter settled into silence, until I knew for certain that we had crossed a line neither of us wanted to erase. The air outside the shower felt almost too cool against our skin, goosebumps racing up my arms even as the damp heat still clung between us. Cody's grin hadn't faded since the moment we stepped out, his towel draped carelessly around his waist, his eyes lingering on me with the kind of focus that makes you forget to breathe. When he caught me looking back at him, he tilted his head, the smirk spreading wider. "What?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. He shrugged, still grinning. "I'm just trying to figure out how the guy who used to sit by the pool pretending to read while sneaking looks at me ended up letting me into his shower." I laughed, shaking my head, tugging the towel tighter around my waist to hide just how much his teasing got to me. "Please," I said, smirking back, like you didn't know I was staring. His eyebrows shot up. "Oh, I knew. You weren't exactly subtle, boss." The way he said that word, boss, in a low, teasing drawl sent a shiver through me, and he saw it. His grin softened into something hungrier, and when he stepped closer, his towel slipped lower on his hips. "You know," he murmured, his voice husky now, "I'm not done with you yet." Before I could reply, he dropped the towel completely, leaving it pooled on the floor like an afterthought, and closed the space between us in 2 long strides. His hands found my waist, pushing me back until I bumped against the counter, and then his mouth was on mine again, fierce, claiming, tasting like everything we'd been holding back. I gasped into the kiss, clutching his shoulders, while his wet hair brushed against my forehead and the world tilted on its axis. There was laughter too, tangled between the heat, him chuckling when my towel slipped loose, me groaning at the smug look on his face as he kicked it aside. Every kiss came with a tease, every touch came with a grin, until we were laughing into each other's mouths, like 2 kids who had finally gotten away with something forbidden. The pool outside shimmered under its lights, throwing ripples of turquoise across the walls, so that for a moment it felt like we were underwater, too weightless, unanchored, free. The sound of cicadas filtered in through the open window, loud and insistent, like the night itself was buzzing with approval. When he finally slowed, both of us panting, he pressed his forehead to mine, his hand still gripping my hip with that firm certainty that said he wasn't letting go. "Jake," he whispered, his voice rough, "I need you to understand something. I'm not going anywhere after this. Not tomorrow, not the day after. You're not just a fling to me." My chest tightened at the sincerity in his tone. I cupped his face, brushing my thumb along his damp jaw, and whispered back, "Good, because I wouldn't let you walk away even if you tried." His grin returned, softer this time, and he kissed me again, slower, surer, like a promise sealed in water and laughter. We finally pulled ourselves apart long enough to stumble toward the couch in the pool house, both of us laughing breathlessly, dripping water across the tile as if we didn't care how much of a mess we left behind. Cody grabbed one of the old beach towels from the rack, tossed it over my shoulders, then wrapped another around his waist, but neither of us bothered drying off properly. The heat between us had nothing to do with the shower anymore. He dropped down beside me, his shoulder pressed tight against mine, the towel sliding halfway down his chest. For the first time since this whole thing started, the silence wasn't heavy with tension, it was calm, almost sacred, filled with the sound of cicadas outside and the occasional ripple of water from the pool. I leaned back, my head hitting the cushion, and let out a shaky laugh. "I can't believe this just happened." Cody tilted his head toward me, his lips curling into that familiar smirk. "Really?" "Because I've been picturing it every damn week I've been here." His tone was teasing, but the way his hand slid over mine, fingers lacing with certainty, carried no joke at all. I turned to look at him, really look, and the playfulness in his expression softened into something raw. "This isn't just fun for me," he said quietly, his voice lower than the hum of the pool filter. "I don't want you thinking I'm just messing around because I clean your pool and you're easy on the eyes." I smiled, brushing my thumb across the back of his hand. "Good, because it's not just fun for me either. I've wanted this for longer than I care to admit." He exhaled sharply, almost a laugh, almost a sigh, and leaned closer, pressing a soft kiss against my cheek before resting his forehead to mine. "You're gonna ruin me," he whispered, though the way his lips curved gave him away. He wanted exactly that. The pool light outside flickered as a breeze rippled across the surface, and the shifting glow spilled across the room, painting his face in shades of blue and silver. For a long moment, I memorized the sight of him: damp hair, flushed lips, eyes that couldn't quite stop smiling, and realized this wasn't just the start of something physical. It was the start of something real. We sat like that for what felt like forever, his head resting against mine, our fingers still entwined, the night outside carrying on without us. And for once, I didn't care about tomorrow, or what anyone would think, or how messy things might get. All I cared about was the fact that he was here, next to me, exactly where I wanted him. The quiet between us was so easy that I almost forgot the world existed outside the pool house. Almost. The creak of the gate swinging open jolted us both upright, our heads snapping toward the glass door that looked out onto the yard. Through the thin curtains, I caught the beam of a flashlight sweeping across the patio, slow and casual, and for a moment my chest tightened with panic. Cody's hand gripped mine. "Relax," he whispered. "Probably just the neighbor checking his fence again. He does it every couple nights." But the sound of boots crunching against gravel told me whoever it was closer than the fence. We sat frozen, towels clutched around us, the steam still clinging to our skin, while the flashlight lingered on the pool. I swore I could hear my own heartbeat pounding louder than the cicadas outside. Then, just as quickly, the beam turned away, the footsteps fading back toward the street, and the gate creaked shut again. The silence that followed was deafening until Cody let out a shaky laugh, burying his face in his hands. "God, Jake, we almost got caught. I think my heart just stopped." I laughed too, the tension cracking into relief. But when I looked at him, his eyes weren't just wide with nerves, they were alive, excited, like the rush had only pushed him closer to me. Before I could say anything, he leaned in and kissed me again, quick and rough, laughing against my mouth. "Guess that makes it official," he said breathlessly. "We're a cliché now. Pool boy sneaks around with the guy who hired him." I groaned, shoving his shoulder playfully. "Don't make it sound cheap." He grinned, pinning me back against the cushions, his damp hair falling into his face. "Then stop worrying about what it sounds like and start thinking about how it feels." The kiss that followed was softer, deeper, not rushed by panic or sharpened by lust, just full of certainty. We melted back into each other, the world outside the pool house fading away again, the near interruption only making it clearer that we didn't want to stop. When he finally pulled back, his voice was quieter, steadier. "I don't care if anyone sees us," he whispered, brushing his thumb along my jaw. "I just care if you're in this with me." I held his gaze, my chest tightening with something that wasn't fear anymore. "I'm in," I said simply, and that was all either of us needed. The night stretched on, but neither of us seemed ready to let it go. The air outside had cooled, the cicadas softened into a quieter hum, and the glow from the pool lights painted the ceiling in moving streaks of turquoise, as if the water itself wanted to remind us what had brought us together. Cody still sat pressed against me on the couch, one towel long since abandoned on the floor, the other slipping off his shoulder as his body leaned into mine like it belonged there. We didn't speak at first. We didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was full, alive, charged with a comfort that felt brand new and yet as old as every glance we'd ever shared across the patio. Eventually, though, Cody lifted his head, his hair still messy from the shower, his lips curved in a tired but satisfied grin. "You know," he said softly, "when I first took this job, I figured I'd skim leaves, shock the water, maybe get a tan. I didn't think I'd end up here." I laughed, brushing my thumb along his jaw. "What? Making out with your client in the pool house?" He grinned wider. "Exactly. Didn't see that on the job description." The joke landed, but his eyes stayed serious, glinting in the shifting blue light. "This isn't just a fling for me, Jake," he added, his voice lower now. "I don't want you thinking I'm going to show up next week, clean the filter, and pretend none of this happened." In the proselyton, I held his gaze, my chest tightening at the sincerity in his words. "Good," I whispered, leaning closer until our foreheads touched. "Because if you tried to pretend this didn't mean anything, I'd call you out in front of the whole neighborhood." That made him laugh, a real, deep laugh that rumbled through his chest and warmed me all over again. Then he kissed me, slow, certain, unhurried, and in that moment I knew the truth. This wasn't an accident, wasn't a mistake. It was the start of something neither of us could have planned, but both of us wanted more than we could have admitted before tonight. We curled up together, the pool lights fading as the timer clicked off, leaving only the silver glow of the moon spilling through the window. His hand found mine again, fingers lacing tight, and he whispered, almost like a secret, "This changes everything." I smiled against his hair, whispering back, "Exactly. That's the point." And as the night settled around us, I realized something simple but undeniable. Sometimes you don't see love coming. Sometimes it walks through the gate with a net and a grin. Sometimes it says need a hand when it really means I'm here. If you'll have me, if you're still here, you made it all the way to the end of this story, thank you. We pour everything into these stories so that every glance, every kiss, every twist keeps you hooked. If this one made your heart race, or if you just like the idea of love showing up in the most unexpected place, drop a comment and let us know. Tell us what moment hit you hardest. Was it the shower, the laughter, or the quiet promise at the end? Your words mean the world, and they're what keep us telling stories like this.